Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast, where we share conversations with amazing people who have achieved extraordinary success through embracing their struggles and imperfections. Often they have succeeded not just despite their perceived flaws, but because of them too. Please do subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone else who you think might be interested. On today's episode, we speak with Alex Williams about coming through and beyond the devastating trauma he faced when he was 8 years old and his mother was murdered in the next door room, and how he's grown into the man he is today. Okay, well, welcome Alex Williams to this podcast episode of Perfectly Flawed, and I'm really so happy that you've come all this way. This is the first time we've met in the flesh, although I've followed your work and really love what you do. I've heard you speak online, and I've watched and followed your posts. And the thing that really appealed to me about what you say and why I wanted you to come here is because you talk about living our life in a more sort of, we'll talk about what positive means in a bit, but you just help people who have maybe been through some dark times to come back and build their strength, build their positivity, and build up their life and be able to live a good life. And I've been thinking about the subtitle for Perfectly Flawed, and I think it's about the art of being human. And I think you're all about the art of being human, while also putting some really great cynical posts about how sometimes the self-help industry has just become a little bit too fake. So, yeah,
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, there's definitely a part of me that likes to be very sarcastic and piss-takey towards that industry. Whether that's helpful or not, I don't know, but I like to do it. So
yeah. So tell me about the work that you do.
Yeah, so it's hard. I'm essentially a registered mental health practitioner and a mental health speaker. So when people ask, what does that involve? Really, it's about helping people to get back up when life knocks them down, because we all experience struggles, and I don't like putting them all under the umbrella of a mental health challenge or disorder or whatever. But like those moments affect us and they stop us living our life, not like the best life ever, but living a life that's kind of, I'm going to use the authentic word here, but more authentic to us about, in line with what we really want to do. So my job is essentially to help people get back up, and so they can then build those lives that kind of keep them happier, more fulfilled, also promote a level of resilience. And I love it. It's quite a privilege, I find, to sit there and hear people's darkest moments, darkest stories, and then kind of normalize that for them and then help them to kind of improve their life, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah, so you've talked about building resilience and that sort of thing, but do you think there's a point in which it can go too far? I have read your cynical posts, and tell me about that side of what you communicate.
I find that the wellness, mental health, personal development landscape is a bit too perfect, a bit too polished, a bit too like if you do this then you can achieve this. It's very much focused on kind of achieving these perfect goals that I think of course in an ideal world we like to think we'd all like that. We often pursue what we believe we should want than what we actually want. And we watch some influencer online who's apparently gone through some significant trauma, and now they're like running this company that's earning them 6-7 figures. They've got the perfect house, the perfect car, the perfect partner supposedly. So on the surface, us normal people, whatever normal is, we look at that and go, oh God, our lif's crap. What is my life? Is it really amounted to anything? Am I a failure? And I think this is a big problem we have in society. We look at perfectly normal, happy lives that 20, 25 years ago, we would have been like, hey, I'm really happy. And now we look at that and go, look at someone else's life and go, oh God, my life's really crap. And I think it's a big problem we have. And I think one of the things I like to tackle when it comes to resilience and mental health and all that sort of stuff is kind of say that, honestly, most of you probably, if you had that, wouldn't be as happy as this person's trying to make you believe you would be. And actually, I think happiness, contentment, fulfillment, resilience come from things that are a lot closer to home. Things that when we actually pay attention to what we we enjoy where we feel like at our best, or maybe not our best, we just feel comfortable, content, things that we probably find a lot close to home. You know, and I know that in my own journey. That doesn't mean we can't have aspirations, you know, and dreams and goals, because I think they're really healthy. But I think a lot of the time, us chasing those aspirations, dreams, these things we've been told to pursue on social media are often coming from a place of not feeling good enough, which isn't a healthy place to build anything from, because you'll get to that place and then you'll be like, oh, I still don't feel great.
Yeah.
So I often think it's actually about challenging some of that, especially some of the new agey stuff, which may work for some people, but I think a lot of it just skirts over stuff, has us focus on overly positive stuff, trying to pursue these outlandish goals, when reality is I don't think most of us actually want that.
Yeah, I think there seems to be a difference between the what you're aspiring after and the way you go about it, and when the focus is on the what, the end product, and the way gets neglected, then we lose sight of what the real healing journey is, or the healthy or happy making thing is, because happy making thing is not the end point, is it? It's that thing along the way. Have you heard the Chinese proverb? It's like a curse. May all your dreams come true.
Oh, no, I haven't heard that. I like that.
That kind of idea. But I know that you in a way, you're talking about three things, because there's the trauma, or the bad experiences, you know, things not being great, so negative experiences. And then there is accepting the reality as it is now in some way, or embracing it or enjoying it, which I think is a perfectly flawed philosophy. Definitely. Our life is perfectly okay in its flawed beauty, you know, in its flawed perfection. And then there's the aspirations, things we want to make happen or manifest, or all of those things. And do you think there's a problem with wanting those aspirations?
Not necessarily. I don't think there's any, you know, it's up to everyone to choose what they want to pursue and to deal with the consequences of that afterwards. I don't think there's a problem with that. But I think when those three parts you've listed, you know, the trauma, the acceptance of where things are now, and the aspirations, I think a problem I see and is that people go from the trauma to the aspirations, and they don't really deal with the acceptance part.
Right.
You know, maybe that involves them skirting over the reality of what they actually experience. I'm not saying living in the trauma and just dwelling there, but actually looking at how that trauma and, you know, adversity, the setbacks you face have actually affected you. And I think, you know, but also there's like, you know, people don't want to go there, so they rather jump to the aspirations and, you know, they think, well, I don't, you know, and we don't like to admit it. We like to, how many people go online and say they're healed, you know, they want to, everyone's, in social media, in a way, they're selling something, aren't they? Either whether it's a product or themselves, they want to give out this picture that they're actually okay and they're doing fine, and therefore you should buy something off me. But I think a lot of them are just jumping to the aspirations. Oh, to heal from that trauma stuff, I've just got to set this massive goal. When a lot of them actually, and I think most people need to sit in that acceptance stage. That acceptance that, God, this is awful. You know, I've been through this stuff. How's this shaped me? Sorry. What has this made? How has this made me view the world? How has this made me view myself? How has this made me view my relationships? And being openly honest. And when you talk about perfectly flawed, and making us realise that we're all humans, we're all a little bit screwed up. And actually, you know, some of the things we're chasing are actually to fill a hole in ourselves that actually could be filled in a lot healthier way.
Yeah.
You know? So you often hear about goal setting being a massive thing. How often are we chasing a goal to make ourselves feel better? And I think that's the problem with personal development, right? Always be out your comfort zone. Right. Always set goals. There's not much about nurturing the stuff you already have that's keeping you well, or you actually appreciate or value. It's all about the next thing. And I think a lot of those people, although they probably won't admit this, are actually just running away from parts of themselves that they're scared to just confront. Those parts that we don't necessarily like about ourselves, those parts that we kind of evolved in the midst of our trauma adversity to protect us, but that we don't want to actually acknowledge because, you know, we're ashamed of them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we spend a lot of time, or we can spend a lot of time living in this aspirational future, or trying to say we've already got there, trying to put this false dream out there to say, look how great my life is and look how amazing I am and all these things I've achieved. So we're living in that kind of false, wonderful, perfect reality, which isn't true. And what you're saying is bring it, just be a bit more nuanced about our life. No one's life is that perfect, and if we're not accepting that the dark side as well, or the difficulties, or the challenges, or the flaws, then we're being fake.
Yeah.
But and yet, how many of us really want to just constantly share that?
Exactly.
And is there a danger in going the other way as well?
Well,
like
I think yes, and I think in today's society, and again, I'm trying to be mindful of how I say this because I don't want to become dismissive of people's awful experiences and the stuff they're going through. But I do find in society now there's a lot we can. It's kind of like, what's the term best to use? It's kind of like cheap satisfaction or cheap purpose, in the sense that we can just talk about our problems, and we'll have and I've had this in my own experience. When I talk about my own experiences, I get loads of likes about talking about the worst moments of my life, and people go, "Oh, that's awful that you've been through that," and that could kind of give us a sense of like, "Oh, we're having purpose," that we're doing something meaningful. And I think being stuck in that kind of state, I'd hate using the word victim mindset because I think it gets thrown around too much by people who haven't actually experienced that much awful stuff in their lives. But I think it kind of gets us stuck in it because we feel like we're getting our sense of community. We belong. If you can get like thousands of people say, "Oh my God, it's awful what you've been through. Oh my God, that's so awful. Oh, it must have been so hard for you," all that sort of stuff. That creates a sense of purpose, of belonging, a community. And then we feel like we're getting our needs met. But ultimately, I don't think there's any long-term satisfaction from that, because I think eventually just talking about everything that's wrong with our lives doesn't make us happy, in my opinion. It doesn't make us feel fulfilled. It's about balancing that, I feel, is where we're maybe going wrong, is that we're not balancing that. We need to acknowledge, yes, that I've been through awful stuff, and I can also build a good life around that stuff, whilst occasionally visiting the bad stuff and occasionally doing the things that I like to do. And I think that's where the balance needs to be a little bit restored.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough one, isn't it? And it can be a whole circuitous journey between between not accepting our past stories and experiences, and just being in denial about the impact of them, and putting a nice fine gloss over the top and go, yeah, my life is great. I can cope. I remember I very much felt I didn't realise until someone said, "Why are you always smiling? Your eyes are so sad, but you're always smiling." And I was like in my mid-20s, and I realised, I've just been taught to plaster a smile on my face and smile through everything. So there's that that balance between, negating our past and just being in complete denial about it, and then that other one of only living in this, only being able to cope if we have a wonderful identity of a successful, amazing person. And neither of that, and what you're saying, it seems like, is, I don't know, or what are you tell me what you're saying of between those two places.
I think the reality of being human is that sometimes life's good, sometimes it's shit, and it's okay to be in both those places, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think we've got two polarized opposites. We've got the people who are like, "Hey, look at me, I'm achieving the best thing. Every negative thing turned into a life lesson." That sort of thing. And you're like, "Okay, whatever, mate." And then you've got the other people.
You're saying there's not a life lesson in every shitty thing that happens?
I don't think so. I don't think in the actual thing. I think, one thing I talk about, you often hear people say like these toxic cliche messages. Well, I think they're toxic, like everything happens for a reason. I don't think that's true. Personally, I think actually lots of things happen for no reason whatsoever. But what I do know to be true is the reason you give things for happening determines the path you take in life. And I think that's the kind of difference you try to get to people, is like try to tell people is that, okay, yes, you've been through this awful stuff, and I've been through awful stuff, and there's nothing good about some of my experiences. There's no way
redeeming
of me saying, "Oh yeah, what did I learn from that? Oh yeah, well, I'm so glad it happened because it wouldn't have turned me into the person I am now." That's all nonsense. If I could go back and change some of those things, I would 100% change them. Yes, they might change who I am now, but I'd rather see what that life is looking like.
Yeah, it's so refreshing just to acknowledge it was absolute shit, and there's nothing good about it. No redeeming factor whatsoever. It was hellish, and that's it. It was no child or human should have to experience some of those things.
Exactly. And I know that life is unfair, but it doesn't mean that the things we experience we have to be grateful or accept that there's some good in there somewhere. I think I think a healthier approach is that life is tough. We'll go through some shit, but doesn't mean we can't create a good life for ourselves, whatever that looks like.
And maybe it's that. I mean, I feel relief kind of almost hearing you say that, because maybe that's the thing that frees you up, instead of delving around, always saying, well, where's the redemption in this? Where's the joy? Instead, it's just saying, no, that was bad, but you still have a life that is available to you to live, and you've still got that, and there's something that can be done with that. Yeah. It kind of strikes me as well with when you're talking about the people that are out there saying they've got these wonderful lives, they are often also the people that are saying, and here was my trauma. They'll kind of use it in the same thing. So there's something kind of really cynical about how their stories are kind of used as leverage things. When I was in the field of addiction recovery, I remember thinking that a lot of stories I heard had just been told so many times. They were just on repeat, and they knew how to use them. They had the story, and they will.
Yeah, and I think as speakers, I have to admit, like sometimes I've told my story loads of times, and I sometimes feel like, God, is this just too polished, too rehearsed now? And it almost like it's lost its feeling, its like impact in a way. And I think, but I do feel like in the culture we're in right now, like most, influencers in the wellness space are probably told, what's your story?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could be something really insignificant.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dismiss again anyone's trauma, because that's really insensitive to me. If anyone's sitting in front of me right now wanting to open up about experiences, I would listen to it, believe it, and I'd acknowledge it, and I'd be there to support them. But I think sometimes they're like, what's my story? What's my hero journey?
Yeah.
This is what I experienced. It was awful. I felt awful, and this is how I rose above it. And I feel, and again, I'm being so cynical here, because I'm sure people think this about me, but like, it doesn't always feel, again, I'm using that authentic word. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like I'm really dealing with a real human. It just feels like this is just a story just to sell something.
Yeah, yeah.
And I it just annoys me to be
honest. I really, really relate to that. And I also myself, I feel like I've used some stories. It's almost like I've prostituted out these stories and I've gone, that will get a good reaction. Yeah. And I don't feel I'm being really, there's not real integrity in myself if I've used them in that way. I feel really horrible about it. It doesn't feel like a good thing to do, to use those stories. And I was part of a course once where at the end of the 6 months, we were encouraged to share a story. And I was under so much pressure to share a particular story. And I felt the story wasn't ready to be shared, and it came out too early, and it didn't come out, and it came out to be used. So I used and abused an element of myself, a story from my own past. I don't know whether you can relate. I can
really relate to that, because I think when I first started kind of deciding that I wanted to do more speaking, it was never the intention to share my story. Like it was literally, I met someone who said, you should share, what's your story? And I was like, well, I went through this and that. And they were like, oh my God, you should talk about that. And that was never my intention. It was always just to like talk about aspects of life, normal aspects of life that that impact us all, that can, if we don't know how to respond to in a healthy way, can really affect our mental and emotional health. So I started talking about that. And I remember like, early on, like I've never, I'm not famous. I've never been like someone who's touring around the world doing loads of talks. But I remember like sharing.
Maybe one day, Alex.
Pardon? Maybe one day, I mean, it's almost like I take my daughter with me. I say that at the moment. When she's a teenager, I might say, no, leave her alone. If you're listening to this, Rosie, in the future, I don't actually mean that. But I can remember thinking like, God, I don't think I'd actually really learnt from my experiences. I think I was just that excitement. Oh my God, I get to decide the life I want to live. I'm listening to this new age stuff. I think I went to some Tony Robbins.
What sort of age were you at this point?
This is probably only like about 35. So really early on. I mean, I was a little bit self-aware because of the work I do in the mental health space, but I'd really unpicked all my stuff.
Yeah.
But I found spirituality quite helpful in the early stages, and I still do. I believe, my mum, who died when I was younger, is here with me right now, and that helps me cope. Whether she is or isn't, there'll be people who don't believe in that, but that brings me comfort. But I think it got me into that new age stuff. I went to a Tony Robbins conference, and I know Tony Robbins helps a lot of people, and often hear people say, oh, you know, his tapes back in the day helped me. That's great. But I think I kind of got so caught up in this kind of, let's just get out there and change the world kind of mentality, because I'm like, oh my God, I get to decide what my life's going to look like. That I really hadn't sat down with myself and thought about how what I'd experienced had really impacted me. It was like, no, and what I realised what I was doing is actually, again, what I've done most of my life is just run away from my problems. I just found another way to run away from my problem, but this was probably more a socially acceptable one, because I was setting big goals and I was thinking, right, let's go talk on this stage, let's go talk on that stage, let's help people heal or recover and stuff. And I realised that some of the messages maybe I shared at the time, maybe around forgiveness and stuff like that, weren't actually how I really felt. It was more like, oh, let's again show people what I believe they want to see and what they need to hear to help them heal. And I thought, actually, this isn't real. This isn't me. And in a way, it kind of maybe fall down this slope of kind of like, I'm not being me here. This is, you know, I am not the guy who gets up. I am an early bird, but I'm not the guy who gets up every morning, who meditates, journals, does a little bit of exercise, stands in front of the mirror saying lovely things to myself every day. You know, I'm not that guy. Some of that stuff works for me occasionally, but like that was kind of who I was telling myself I needed to be, or believed I needed to be to heal. And it just made me feel like, God, this isn't real. This isn't right. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that whole the influence of Tony Robbins kind of is a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Because it's like this whole wave in that he has created in his wake of him and both him and all the people, thousands and thousands of people who have been affected by his work, and all the other people who follow us and the Tony Robbins wannabes.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, that's for sure.
For sure. And, you know, there's that overlay that so many people have had of, let's be really positive about the world. I don't know whether that's toxic positivity, but, you know, maybe it's not all toxic. Maybe it serves a purpose for a bit, because you kind of you get to experience what it's like to be up there and have that kind of high of, wow, my world's amazing and I've got so many things I can achieve and I can do, and isn't this incredible? And you know, and people walk out of that on an absolute high, don't they, after a Tony Robbins or similar event, and it's all like rah rah rah, we can do incredible things, I can do amazing things, my life's going to be incredible, I've got the power, and then there's a kind of reality check at some point.
Yeah, it's a big sales process, really, because it just gets you ramped up to like, literally, I could do anything. And then you go away and you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe you need this expensive life coaching. And they'll tell you what. I remember having it. I went to the Tony Robbins one and it was amazing in the sense of like, essentially he was just getting us to jump around and believe that we could do anything we wanted, which of course is going to make you feel amazing if you're around thousands of people for 4 days doing it. But afterwards, that's when I started cotton on that maybe this isn't what it seemed, because I remember having a call with a coach. And I said, look, I'm just starting to get into the speaking game. You know, I'm doing these talks. I want to create a business. And I remember the first thing he said is like, right, what do you want to earn? And I was like, my head was in the sky. You know, I was deluded. Delusions of grandeur was definitely evident at that point. Probably a little bit manic, to be honest. But I remember thinking, I pulled out like a 6-figure sum. It was brilliant. We'll do that in 6 months. Just didn't know questions about it. It was just like, do this in 6 months. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, but you have to pay this. And then he done the usual, I'm just going to go on hold. So he disappeared, come back and he lowered the price. And I pulled away because my gut wasn't right about the whole thing. But I think a lot of people buy into that. And I think a lot of people not only buy into it, they then fall into, I want to become a life coach. I want to become a therapist or a healer or something like that. And they believe the answer to do that is to just say the same old thing. And I think I'm not saying everyone's like this, but I don't believe half these people, because I think, you know, when they say stuff like, you just got to let it go. Yeah. Get rid of all negative people. The past is in the past. You can't change it. I'm like, that's not how humans evolve. You know, our past is meant to impact us. Who you are now is a product of all your experiences back then. You don't just let it go and just suddenly go, oh, you know what, I'm just going to achieve my dreams. That stuff will be, you know, the dark side of us, the shadow, those parts of us that have evolved to keep us safe in those unhealthy environments we've been in. They're still there. They don't disappear. They don't just decide I'm going to become a multi-millionaire and it all goes away. So I think people get sucked into that. And I think it can be quite harmful for people's recovery. And it's almost like you could kind of see it. It's like it doesn't necessarily feel very authentic online or when you see people's videos or stories, because you kind of think behind the camera in real life, are you really as good as you say you are? Are you really as healthy as you say you are? Are you feeling as amazing as you say you are? Because I don't think you are, and I don't think it's possible for any human. Maybe that's me being negative, but I think it's more actually real. And that's what I try and do in my stuff. It's like, life sucks sometimes, it's always going to suck at certain points. People die, you're going to get sick. Someone out there thinks you're a dickhead, I guarantee it, no matter how nice you are to everyone. There's no way of avoiding that. And that's what I try and get people to realise, not in a negative way, as I say, but like, maybe these people sending this message isn't what you should aspire to be. And it's probably a lie, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, there is that, Jung said people will do almost anything to avoid facing their true self.
Yeah.
And I think that coupled with that is people will pay almost anything or do almost anything to, in the same way, become the person that the identity they prefer to have for themselves, rather than just be the identity that they are.
Yeah.
But I also see people using the negative stories as much as they use the I'm look at me in front of my flash car and all my millions on working from Bali on the beach or whatever they do. So you kind of hear both, don't you?
Yeah. And I think, again, it comes back to that point I raised earlier about, I think sometimes we just need to pull it into the middle. It's like, sometimes I'm struggling. Sometimes life's amazing. And I think that's more of an accurate representation of life for most people. I think, like you said, I think if we're not able to achieve the things we want, we can easily slip into that, well, let's just focus on everything that's wrong with me and the world around me. Let's blame all my life circumstances and everything that's happening around me. And a lot of people, we do need to acknowledge that more. I think we're all products of our environment, and there's a lot of things that are really crap in the world right now that stop us from getting our needs met and going on to be good people. But I think, again, it's like we either tend to sit in one or the other camp at the moment, I think. And I think not me, like I'm trying to be like this amazing person as an example, but I think we need more in the middle, more reality that, yes, okay, this is great. I'm having a great time. Look at me. I'm feeling amazing. I'm on stage doing this great talk. And then there's other times where I'm sitting at home doubting who I am, what I'm doing. Is this the right path for me? Is this goal I set myself actually what I want to achieve? What if I give up on this goal? What are people going to think of me? Am I a failure for that? After announcing that this is what I was going to do. All that sort of stuff is what really happens to people, I think.
Yeah. It's really painful, I think, to come to terms with some, like I've had thoughts in my head like, am I just a complete joke, or is this really trivial, or is what I'm saying just pointless? There's so many things that I kind of think about sharing, and then I kind of go, well, people are going to think all kinds of things about me, and I don't want to be that person. And I think if you choose the profession of speaking and working with people and communicating, you can't get away from showing up as yourself at some point.
No, and I actually find, and you've probably had this yourself, like working with people who, in the therapy, mental health practitioner, counselling sort of space. I mean, when I was doing my training, we were always told, don't share your stuff, and it was almost like we kind of sit in that parental, I know we're not supposed to sit in that parental role, but it almost felt like I'm a parent who knows better than you, poor you, haha, blah, blah, blah. But I actually find it's more effective.
Not so much ha, 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 but...
Yeah, but what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
I think it's actually more powerful to sit there and not be the person who has all the answers and just go, you know what, I haven't been through everything that you've been through, but this is what I've been through. And obviously I wouldn't sit there and list out all my stuff, but sometimes, people, I've experienced massive family dysfunction. So I see it all the time, dysfunction, I see abuse, I see all that sort of stuff. And I go, I don't know what it's like to be you, but I know what it's like to go through that and how hard it is. And some of the choices I had to make, which are really painful decisions, to actually free me a little bit from the stuff that was actually hurting me, to remove myself from the fire.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes to share that and be more human, like as I say, like we could do share online, our experiences of, God, I went through that. That was awful. I think that helps us be more relatable. And also, like, not to get stuck in there too much, because, as I say, it just, it doesn't make our life very good if all we're doing is focusing in on and just talking about everything that's wrong.
Well, I also think, and I was sharing this with you before, that it's so easy to sit in this, like, either a guru status or a position of I'm the healed one, I'm, I've got all my act together, I'm good, you're not, you're a mess, I'm good. And that I was certainly operating from that place, and I got all my validation from helping other people change their lives, and feeling like I was the one that was kind of sorted and fixed. And then I've discovered brutally over time that no, I'm my life can be a complete mess, and then there's other stuff that I seem to be doing pretty well from time to time. So it's been great, a great kind of path to recognise those two things. I say great. I don't know whether it's great.
I think just that it illuminates, doesn't it, how we're actually being in our life. I think for me, like,
but it's quite liberating. I think when you no longer have to be sorted and fixed, it's quite. You don't need to posture anymore.
Well, my experience is exactly the same. Run my life working in mental health, supporting people with like severe and enduring mental illness. Seeing some of the most mentally unwell people you could probably see or imagine seeing. It was a great way of going, I'm not as bad as you, so I must be okay.
Yeah.
And that's literally until I realised that I needed to look at myself. That's essentially how I live my life. It was like, my problems aren't that bad. All this stuff I went through when I was a kid wasn't that bad. I'm okay. And I was okay in comparison. I didn't have a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. I wasn't going around, I wasn't, drinking loads of alcohol, taking drugs, self-harming as a way to manage my emotions. I was on the surface, probably doing okay. But inside, and again, hidden in the back somewhere, when any kind of experience would expose how I was really feeling, it's like I could just crumble. That mask I was wearing just fall away, and I'd be like, oh my God, I kind of want to be here. What's my life? Who am I? I'm worthless. I'm nothing. I'm no good. And then literally I'll get over that and go back to that people pleasing state again. So but that profession we're in does that. I think it attracts. We'll use the term loosely. It attracts people pleasers.
Yeah, and people that get their validation through helping other people and seeing that they're a bit less broken maybe than some of the people around them.
Yeah.
But that all said, so I'm kind of. I do want to ask about what you had hidden back in the recesses of your mind, but I don't want you to feel that you're using your story in that way that we've already talked about. So, what do you think? How do you want to? What was living in the recesses, and how do you?
So it really helps me explain my story.
Yeah.
So I don't mind sharing my story. I'm not whoring myself right now. So I grew up in probably what is considered to be a very normal family. My dad was a lawyer, my mum was a nurse. So on the outside, everything looked fine. But at the age of 3, my mum and dad split up. My dad was having an affair. So my mum rightly was like, no, off you go, we're breaking up. So my earliest memory really that I can remember is actually walking out the house where we lived at the time with my mum, getting in the car and going away. So it's quite sad, obviously really sad memory because, no one at that age really wants their mum and dad to break up. But as a result of that, my mum, I imagined this, I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure given my experiences and the work I do, her self-esteem, a sense of her self-worth was destroyed from that. And after a couple of relationships, other people, she ended up in a relationship with someone who was awful. They got married, but I was young, so I didn't know any different. But I remember watching him, assault his own kids, like physically assault them, and walking down the stairs. One memory I can remember walking down the stairs and seeing in the living room this happening, and I was like,
"What was he doing?"
Beating them up,
right,
assaulting them.
Yeah.
And I can remember standing there, almost like freezing, thinking, "Oh my God!" You kind of like want to watch because you're like, "What the hell is this going on?" But then like, I need to get out there. So in hindsight, I can remember I just kind of in this state of fear all the time, like when I was at home, with my mum and him, thinking, am I going to be next? So every other weekend when I got to see my dad, who was amazing, by the way, he was like, yeah, we're going to, he'd shower me with toys, take me out. He was amazing, took me skiing. I had literally, I worshipped my dad. So I always kind of wanted to live with him because it was like, that's the life I want. And my life at home with mum was just terrifying most of the time. My mum was amazing. She did her best. She did all the things I actually needed to keep me well to an extent. I didn't want to be there. But by the time I was the age of 8, we had moved out briefly to live with my grandparents because we were so terrified of being there, and the stepfather was stalking us at my grandparents and stuff like that. But my mum went back, and
What was he doing by stalking?
he was parking outside his car just around the corner, and I can remember standing at the top window of the house we were staying at, my grandparents, and seeing his car just there. And like, don't go outside. My mum trying to get her to stay inside and stuff like that. I don't know if he was going to do anything at that point, but I just remember, this is weird. What's he doing now? I don't want to go outside. This is scary. And my mum went back, but I stayed with my grandparents at the time because I didn't want to go back. But eventually got to, I think it was the next school term. I was 8 at the time, September. So we moved back in with my mum. But it was, I think it was October the 19th on that year. I was 8 years old. I was sleeping in my sister's room with her. Too scared to sleep in my own room at the time. I just wanted to be near my sister.
Because was lots of shouting and beating
up?
I
just didn't like being in my room. I was in the top. It was like a 3-story house, the top floor. I had a room to myself, and I just didn't like it up there. I was scared, really.
So it's not because you were scared of your stepfather? So
yeah,
it was that.
It was just a general fear of being in that house with him.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was in the room, my sister just sleeping in this camp bed next to her bed, and just this policeman like burst into our room. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I was wearing these pajamas. He like didn't get a chance to dress, or no communication. It was like, took us out, took us down the stairs, put us into one of those like big police vans, those, the meat wagons you'd see on a Saturday night in town. They drove us to the local police station. Now, as I said, I was only 8, so my view, the police, and having like watched programs like The Bill and stuff like that was on in the 90s and stuff like that, was like, they put bad people in prison. And I wasn't well behaved. I think in context I can understand why I wasn't, given what was going on. I was kind of all over the place. I wasn't like doing anything illegal, but I was definitely just couldn't concentrate. So I was running around, just burning off this energy, being a bit of a nuisance.
So did you think you were being taken to prison in that?
I thought, at the time I was like, part of me was like, have I done something wrong here? But anyway, I sat down in this room on a sofa. There was like 5 police officers in front of me, and one of them just leant over in front of us and said, "I'm sorry, your mum is dead." And obviously straight away I was like, I was bawled into tears. But then, it transpired that I wasn't aware at the moment, because obviously the police weren't, I don't think they were ever going to tell an 8-year-old boy what really happened. And I remember discovering on the news 2 days later that, she'd been killed by my stepdad.
Did that add up for you? Was that what you thought was what had happened? Like, did you have an inkling of that?
It's hard to remember, because as soon as I was told that information, it was like, you're just not there. Yeah. It's like, this is it's like, what is the world I'm in? Is this real?
Yeah.
Like, all I can remember is going out from the room and going into a room with my step siblings and like wetting myself. And then all I remember is waking up in this children's home the next day. Right. I think it was
without your sister.
No, my sister was there.
Okay.
They weren't. I never saw them again, and no contact since. And to be honest, I'm not too fussed about it. I've never been one to want to reach out and find out what's going on. I think it's I just never really felt the need to do that. But I remember waking up, and then my dad picked us up that late that day, and it was all really weird because I kind of felt like, I've got what I wanted. I want to live with my dad. I want to have all those weekends with him. This is amazing. But then obviously being absolutely distraught that my mum's gone. But anyway, we went and stayed.
But were you distraught, or were you just kind of, at that point, just bamboozled by That's
probably a really good way of describing it. Yeah, just back like, what is this going on?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like straight away that, well, that's me screwed for life. Because I've just lost my mum. I don't know anyone who's lost their mum. And and I wasn't aware of the care system or people who've been through trauma at that age. But in a way, in my mind, I was like, well, God, if I haven't got a mum, what can I really hope for? Now, we went to stay with our grandparents for 9 months because my dad was living in London. He was a really successful lawyer, but he was very much living the kind of bachelor life, doing his own thing. But eventually his response was, I think probably because he didn't know any better, was, I'm successful, I'm just going to build you a massive house with all this stuff. So like, young kid, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing, But what I realised early on is like, we didn't go to the funeral. Now, of course, I understand that, an 8-year-old, my sister's a few years younger than me, you probably don't want to take your kids to a funeral But I think what I realised quite soon was that we weren't allowed to talk about our experience, what was going on. It was just never a conversation. It was no one ever went to me and go, God, that was awful. How are you feeling about that? So even though I was feeling like confused or this pain, if I'd ever go to talk about it, and this kind of carried on from pretty much all my life, I'm going to say with my dad, it was like kind of, you just need to get over it, be grateful. And I remember even being told many times that, most dads would put their children in an orphanage. It was like, and now at the time, I think about that now, I'm like, that's messed up. But because it's your dad, you just thought, oh yeah, he's probably right. And I was like,
lucky me.
Yeah, oh God, look at this life I've got. And of course, on the surface of it, having money, to everyone outside of that, looking at my life, they were probably thinking, oh God, you've just, you've landed on your feet. Materialistic wise, I had. But emotionally and, from what I actually needed from someone close to me to help me process that and kind of grow to be like a healthy person who can actually kind of tap into that potential that we all have as humans, kind of wasn't there. So quickly what I realised is because I couldn't talk about my experiences, I changed who I was to just be happy, just get on with life, make my dad happy, do what he wants, What do you want me to study, Dad? Okay, I'll study that. What do you want me to do in my life? Okay, I'll study that.
So did you live your life to please your dad?
Yeah,
at that point?
Essentially, for many years. And it's almost like, and I realise now it's all because I'd already lost my mum. That it felt like I was abandoned by my mum, even though I know I wasn't. It was like I was abandoned by my mum. But I couldn't risk being rejected and abandoned from my dad as well. So literally, it was like, oh, I can't lose another parent as well. But as I grew up, I did go to, when I got to about 18, after like really just continue to fail and just meet my dad's needs, I kind of didn't have any qualifications, didn't know what I wanted to do, who I was.
Were you meeting your dad's needs or were you failing your dad?
I think I was still failing my dad because I wasn't achieving what he wanted. I wasn't being who I felt I was, not that I knew who that was. So I kind of just ended up taking these dead-end jobs. But eventually I went and trained to become a mental health nurse. Now, I've said this many times to people. It wasn't like, oh my God, my mum's been killed and I've been in a children's home for like a day. I need to go help all these traumatized children, bereaved children. It was literally like they paid me to do it and I had nothing else to lose. But it was one of the greatest things I ever did because it gives me an ounce of credibility for sitting here and talking about mental health, I think, but it also led me to a really good career.
And gave you maybe the groundwork before you were ready to engage, but the groundwork for taking part in your own mental health recovery.
Exactly. I think it did, and when I get to, for a year, I didn't realise at the time, but for years, again, when we touched on this again, it was good, but it was also a distraction from my pain. Because as I said, I was working with people who appeared on the surface a lot more unwell and who were symptom wise were a lot more unwell than me. So, I'm okay, I'm doing all right. But essentially I had this mindset, okay, I've got a steady job. Now I just need to find a partner, get a mortgage, that kind of standard, settle for like the basics in life and I'll be okay. I had a few semi-serious relationships, all having the potential to be the one. That was the mindset, who will complete me, make me feel good enough. But when I got to like the age of 34, so I've been qualified for about 10 years, but I'm working in mental health about 13 or 14. I finally felt like I'd achieved this thing. I had a mortgage, I was engaged, and I felt like I was just good enough. Like I was important, I was good enough. But then it ended. Like the relationship ended. That meant I lost the house. And suddenly I was like this 34-year-old man who just thought, who am I? What am I? Can I really be bothered with life anymore? Like I've been through so much and now another thing. And it's just like these thoughts in my head of like just not wanting to be here. I was driving along thinking, swerve off the road and it will all be over. I won't have to experience any more pain again. So I put this down to my dog. Like, I think, I really believe that all of us, like, caring for something else gives us a huge amount of purpose. And I see it so many times, especially people who've been in like traumatic relationships, situations like mine, with animals, when they can't trust people, they find an animal and it gives a lot of sense of purpose. And I honestly think if it wasn't for my dog and being worried about who would look after him, I probably wouldn't be here today. But around that time, I came across Viktor Frankl. And I don't like talking about light bulb moments because I don't generally believe people have light bulb moments. I think it's a gradual unraveling, but it was reading his book, Man's Search for Meaning, when he said, like, everything can be taken from you accept your ability to choose how you respond, your ability to choose your own way. Having read his story and what I'd been through, I realised that my life, I'd never done that. I just, in a sense, I'd just been choosing to respond in a way that I felt others wanted me to respond, or how others wanted me. It was never anything that was genuine to me.
But just for those that aren't familiar with his work, obviously he was in Auschwitz and death camps and things. So he's like, was it 3 years in a concentration camp? I think only 1 out of 26 people actually survived, but he went on to recover and become quite this authority figure, didn't he, in psychology and the mental health space. And he's really inspiring. And I don't think we should play trauma top trumps here and compare our trauma to that. But I remember thinking, when I was reading this book, thinking, bloody hell, he's been through worse than me. Why can't I recover from this? And just on that point about trauma top trumps, which is a great way of putting it, it still is helpful. I mean, this is why I wanted you to share your story as well, because it's so important for me that on this podcast, I show people who have been through all kinds of experiences and yet are living a kind of happy, genuine life. I mean, that's really, why you're here and why I'm having these conversations with people, because it is about how to, the art of living and the art of being human. And if you kind of found that despite that, which is what Viktor Frankl did, despite his horrific experiences, or maybe because of, and for you as well, you're finding your own way of life, even though you went through all of that. And I know you haven't quite finished your story, but I just want to just rewind a little bit to that point where you were driving along and you thought I could just swerve off the road. It's where you'd lost your home, you'd lost your relationship. It seemed like, the way I'm understanding it is, it seemed like you had built up an identity to cope through all those years. And by the time you got to 34, you kind of went, right, I've got life. I've done everything I'm meant to do the way I'm meant to do it. I've found someone I can marry. I've got a job I like, home, everything's going well. So I made it. And it seemed like it was at that point, once you got this like false identity that you were living in, that's when it cracked.
100%. Open. It's like, I kind of describe it as like the destination where I finally would be good enough.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I've got this now and I can just relax. I've sussed life. I no longer feel like a failure.
You've arrived.
Yes, I finally reached that destination and I'm good enough now. And as soon as that was ripped away from me, I realised that I wasn't actually building anything meaningful or purposeful to me. I was running away from all my pain. I was running away from the part of me who felt damaged because his mum died, running away from the part who felt like he wasn't important because my emotions weren't allowed to be expressed or listened to. Part of me who felt like I wasn't good enough because I didn't achieve the things my dad wanted me to achieve. All those things I was running away from. And essentially when that kind of crumbled away, I suddenly realised that, God, I feel like nothing. And I'd lost pretty much most of the fight in me to try and do that again, because it was like, well, how am I going to who's going to want to be with me now? I know I don't. I'm 41 now, so I still feel young. But at the time, I was like, God, I'm getting old. Who wants to be with me? My job's okay, but it's going to take me ages to save to get my own house. And I was just like, the fight had gone in me.
Yeah.
And it was like,
and the self-worth. Sound like you thought you were worth nothing. Who'd want to be with you? You're just you've got no value. No.
I just literally thought no one cared, and they were, obviously people did care, but I never really spoke to anyone about how I was feeling. It was very much an inside kind of. At that point, I've just got to get on with this and do it, which was helpful in some ways, because I do believe a massive part of recovering is sitting in a room and being reflecting on your life and how it's made you feel, how it's turned you into the person you are now. I think that's really helpful. But equally, what I was missing was the community, and kind of I lost touch again with the bits that make me who I am, the things that were actually good because of those things or maybe because of those things I experienced. And I think it was kind of from that moment, then it was kind of bringing acknowledging the trauma and how it impacted me, but also acknowledging the good that's come from it. Not from it, from what I've evolved, the good that's come from me because of those experiences, or just because of my life that shaped me into who I am now. I'm bringing them together and realizing that actually not all of who I am now is just a negative product of all my experience. There's some good in there. but also a lot of it isn't good. Not in that I'm a bad person, but like, God, there's a lot of stuff holding me back here that I need to kind of unpick a little bit. So.
Well, I think one of the biggest gifts that you had, if we are going to find any gifts from this side, which we did say we weren't going to do, but is that I think the ability to walk with someone in their darkness and through as they recount that trauma or, dark times in their life, or share their low self-worth, and to just be able to be with that person as they do that alongside them without trying to fix it or change it, but just to allow them to keep walking. I think that's an amazing gift, and that's something which, clearly you're able to do now. And whether you could do it before, I think, well, you tell me, but my sense is until you can do it with yourself, how can you go and walk really side by side with somebody else with a trauma?
100%. I don't think you necessarily have to be healed. I don't believe in this healing. I do believe in a healing journey, but I don't believe in this idea that you need to get to this point where you're healed before you can live your life. But I do believe that understanding ourselves a little bit, those wounds we've got, the pain we carry with us, how it's affected us in life, becoming aware of that rather than ignoring it it really helps you help other people, because you can kind of sit there in a compassionate state with them. You can demonstrate empathy because you're like, I kind of know what that's like. And I actually believe like the most important part of anyone's journey is that relationship with yourself. Like if anyone asked me like, what was the thing that really helped you move forward, and it was like kind of realizing that I was just doing my best, and actually, even though yes I can be a dickhead sometimes, like at heart I'm a good person. I generally have good intentions, and all the mistakes I ever made in life and all the times I kind of didn't pursue the things that I actually wanted in life was all with good intentions, because I just wanted to be safe. I wanted to be accepted by those around me. But as I always say to people, like, there's no point giving yourself a hard time for having a hard time. And I think that's what essentially most of my work is around, is trying to stop that beating yourself up for going through awful experiences and realising that you're just having a tough time and you've had numerous tough times. But to overcome that is to kind of build that healthy relationship with ourselves, which is hard, much easier said than done. It's hard because when we're young, we think we're the problem most of the time. But the problem is the problem's the problem, you're not the problem. Like the problem in my situation was that I had an abusive stepfather. My mum was killed. I had a dad who essentially just threw money at me. And yes, okay, there were some good times, but generally, like, that wasn't the healthiest way. I was never the problem in that environment. I didn't cause these things to happen. I was just someone who experienced that and adapted to that.
So then going forward into your life, having accepted that in the past, what is it that you want in the way you want to live your life? What is it you're looking for forward? Having kind of made your peace or whatever it is that you've done with your past. What is it that you want for yourself in the future and for other people too?
I think it's hard because I think it's good to have goals, but I think it's kind of acceptance. I want acceptance of who we are, to like ourselves or respect ourselves at the very least. That's kind of how I feel. I know that people say you should love yourself, but I don't think it's a goal that we shouldn't aim for, but I think that can feel really unrealistic. But I think it's just to treat ourselves a little better. Like, I know
be kind to yourself.
Yeah, it's just be gentle, because I think what I've learned in my own journey and with the people I support is that, success is whatever you decide it is. Like, and it can be literally the simplest thing, or it can be like, yes, I want to become this multimillionaire. It's up to you to decide that. But I think a really key component of getting to wherever you want to go to or creating a good life is learning to accept and like yourself and be kind to yourself. I remember when I first started on my journey of like when I delved into all the self-help stuff, I remember picking up, I think it was Think and Grow Rich by what's his name? I can't remember.
Victor Hansen, is it?
I can't remember his name, but anyway, I remember I was in the corner of all the New Age stuff then. And I remember sitting there with this kind of smug look on my face thinking, look at me, I'm reading self-help. And there's that guy in the corner on his own, reading newspaper. He's probably miserable, drinking his beer. And I remember thinking, God, I bet his life is rubbish. Look at him just doing that. And in hindsight, I realised that actually he's probably happier than me sitting in his own company. No, he might not be, but generally these people who are doing the simplest of things are probably happier and more content than the people who are constantly working on themselves. And working on yourself is good, but I think most of us, and I know from my experience, is that a lot of time I was working on myself because I didn't feel good enough. When actually when you build that healthy relationship acceptance of who you are, when you get to that stage where you kind of feel, actually, I'm okay as who I am and what I like is okay. And yes, I have flaws and stuff like that, but that's okay. When you accept that, then what you pursue, it becomes from a healthier place. It's like now I find in the stuff I do, and I don't always get it right.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, I actually want to do that. It's not, I have to do that to prove myself.
That's a big difference, isn't it? Like being perfectly flawed is saying, yeah, I do have these flaws. I don't need to prove I'm perfect all the time.
No, exactly.
So I love that we seem very attuned on this philosophy, and I thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your insights into life and how to live it, the Alex Williams way.
I might hit a trademark.
How can people find out more about your amazing work?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. I'm not that active on Instagram or TikTok at the moment because I've got a 10-month-old baby, and I decided to focus all my attention on that and making sure I get enough sleep and I'm healthy to look after her. But yeah, my handle's the Alex J. Williams on those 3 platforms. And I just reach out to me if you want to have a chat, or just follow my content and find that sometimes I'll be talking about my whole bad stuff. Sometimes I'll be taking the piss out of the world being well, and sometimes I'll be talking about the things that are going well. But yeah.
And if you could sum up what perfectly flawed means to you, what do you think it would be?
Perfectly flawed means, to me, accepting that you're human, that you have good traits, that you have not so good traits, and that sometimes life's going to go well, sometimes it's not, but none of that means there's something wrong with you.
That's wonderful. And finally, what would be some advice to a younger you?
Oh, God. Little me would be like, if I was to go back and speak to little me, I'd be like, I love you. None of this is your fault. I'm here for you, however you feel, however that shows up, whatever you want to do, no matter how silly or trivial that may be, let's go do it. We'll figure it out. We'll make mistakes, but we'll be okay.
Love it. And those are wonderful words for all of our ears. Thank you so much, Alex Williams. It's been such a pleasure.
No, thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. Thank you to Alex, and thank you. Start again. Thank you very much to Alex Williams, and also thank you to you for listening. I know it's not always easy to hear that, but what I found so interesting was how toxic the personal development industry can be, and what we can do about it so that we are not overlaying our trauma with just a happy smile, and instead really understanding how we can embrace and move through that devastation in a more authentic way that has greater integrity for us and aligns with who we truly can be in the world. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you like it and you leave a review. It makes such a difference to us. And also share it with anyone else who you think could benefit from listening to this episode. Also, make sure that you subscribe, because that way you won't miss out on any future episodes. And we've got some really great ones coming up, as well as some fantastic ones in our back catalogue.